Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. State lawmakers passed a so-called Parents' Bill of Rights last year to give parents more access to their child's school records, including medical and criminal information. But an effort to amend the bill this year has put Olympia in the center of a nationwide debate. In 2024, the State House and Senate agreed to pass Initiative 2081, a so-called Bill of Rights, providing parents more access to school records, what proponents saw as a healthy connection between parents and their students.
Keeping parents and children close together is best for families and for kids.
But Democrats and the state superintendent of schools say the new measure needs to be amended to align with existing state and federal laws on child privacy.
Since its passage, Initiative 2081 has created a lot of confusion and concern for students, educators, and our school staff.
Plus, advocates say the bill could force kids who've confided in their teachers about their gender identity, for example, to out themselves to their parents.
You're at greater risks of suicide and self-harm, and without a supportive environment, these risks grow exponentially.
We risk alienating families at a time when engagement is more critical than ever.
But 2081 supporters say the amendments in the House and Senate are essentially rolling back a Bill of Rights measure that 450,000 petition signers in the state supported.
It is taking a sledgehammer to democracy.
And 2081 supporters have gained sympathy from national conservative voices as this issue escalates in our state capital.
Parents want to know and have a right to know.
What's the future of the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights?
Parents are being treated increasingly as public enemy number one.
The Parental Bill of Rights language is vague. It's unclear.
You'll hear from both sides next on City Inside Out. Thanks for joining us once again here on City Inside Out on the Seattle channel. I'm Brian Callanan, and I have with me two people with some different opinions on the plan to amend the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, which the legislature passed last year, I-2081. First, Tyler Crone is a public health advocate, parent, and lawyer who previously served as the founding director of the Athena Network, an organization dedicated to gender equality, human rights, and global health. Tyler, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.
We also have with us Vicki Murray, who is the director for the Center of Education and the Paul W. Locke Research Fellow for Education at the Washington Policy Center, a nonprofit that promotes public policy based on free market solutions. Vicki, good to have you here too.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks. Let's get into this. Tyler, I wanted to get your take on the Parents' Bill of Rights. So many people have been talking about this in Olympia as it's going through some changes here. Give us an overview of what you would like to see come out of this legislative session and why.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Vicki, I'm so delighted to be in conversation with you. And Brian, I'm so thankful that you are shedding light on an opportunity for us to talk about our shared values of having kids who are safe, healthy, happy, thriving in our schools, of having educators being able to educate, having parents being able to partner with schools. So I think that there are so many shared values that we come to this question with. There are two aspects that I'll look at this from. Of one, just being a parent. I've been a parent in our public schools in Seattle since 2008. And the other hat is a little bit more that kind of policy advocacy. What is the landscape like around parental rights, and what is this movement really representing? And so when I look at this legislative session, I look to the Parental Bill of Rights that was an initiative last year that was a cut and paste effort from an language in Louisiana. And I think that if we look at where a Parental Bill of Rights movement is going nationally, there's a way in which we have to look to what makes sense in each state, what makes sense in terms of the legal framework in each state, and also what is behind this movement. I'll put that to the side for just a moment and be a mom. for this legislative session, the Parental Bill of Rights language is vague. It's unclear. Some of it is contradictory with the legal protections we have in our state for people to be free and to be free of discrimination and to be able to go to school with a disability and be safe and be welcome and included. And I also look at that as the parent of a child who has been very happily involved in a community group for students of South and Central American descent. I look at that as the parent of a child who was transgender and who transitioned in elementary school. And how are we ensuring that our schools are welcoming? And so for me, I'm really keen for us to reassert our values in Washington State, where we come together and what we believe, that we're putting in our protections so that folks are free of discrimination. Students can show up whatever their background is. And then the last piece that concerns me of where we need to go as the state legislature this year is to make sure our students and our teachers, particularly our teachers, are safe to welcome students however they show up in their classroom. And that's the piece, I think, in the House bill that there's a lot of conversation around, of protecting teachers from retaliation.
Okay, hold that thought. I know you have a lot of them, and I want to make sure we hear from Vicki here. Just tell us about maybe your concerns about amending the Bill of Rights and some of the thoughts you have about that, please.
Well, I think first we have to step back, because you start talking about this issue, and it's not just in Washington. Washington is there. Half the states in the country now have a Parents' Bill of Rights, and likely after this legislative session, there are going to be a whole lot more. Even before we got into a Parents' Bill of Rights, I think Arizona was the first one to actually enact one in 2010. 2/3 of states already across the country have statutes and or legal precedents that actually have what's called a standard of strict scrutiny, which is, very exacting, that acts as a sort of Parents' Bill of Rights. So I think we have to step back, take a breath, because it's gotten very heated, national attention.
Yep.
This is just a transparency bill for parents that does two things. Number one, it doesn't give parents new rights, it just affirms fundamental rights they already had. You have access to what's going on in your children's classrooms. And number two, you get notified about stuff. And I think anyone who's a parent at the beginning of the school year, you know what it's like. Children come home with, it looks like, something along the line of three-ring binder of things you have to sign. So this is not something new. People, emotions are running high, but that's no way to make good policy. So I think we have to stand back and see what it really does and see what's really at stake, instead of, let's not be fearful. Let's look at what the initiative actually does.
All right, thank you for breaking it down that way. I want to talk about some of the different changes proposed in the bill seeking to amend 2081. This is what the legislature is dealing with right now. I want to focus first on the medical health and mental health records at schools. So the original initiative said, let's give parents access to those records within 10 days of a request and require schools to notify parents when medical services are offered or provided to kids. The amended versions in the House and Senate are saying parents can have access to education records like attendance, discipline, and so forth, but the bills would remove this medical services part because that's available through other state disclosure laws. That's what a lot of Democrats who are pushing this are saying. Vicki, I know supporters of this change are saying it's about protecting student privacy, which has been part of state and federal law for decades here. What's your take on this medical part of the bill, please?
Well, the medical bill, first we have to recognize that parents already have certain rights in law, and children already have, for example, children who are LGBTQ, already a protected class in Washington. So again, we have to step back. That's nothing that's an issue. We can't have contradictory laws. However, what we do have to keep in mind is that everyone at this table wants to keep children safe. I imagine everybody watching wants to keep children safe. For the vast majority of parents, that's the vehicle for keeping children safe. 98% or better.
Okay.
We do, sadly, have children who are in exceptional circumstances. And it's nothing we'd wish. It's, the parent-child relationship is one of the most natural relationships in creation. But that has broken down for whatever reason. Children aren't safe because of their parents.
Right.
There's no conflict here. There is a way where you can protect parents' rights. The primary folks responsible for keeping children safe, while also having, there are at least half a dozen legal exceptions and protections we could have for children who are in those exceptional circumstances. We don't have to throw out one or the other, so I think we have to stop this binary thinking.
Okay. Can you talk to me, Tyler, if you could, about this, just your take on this? Because I think there's some concerns about certainly kids who are transgender being outed by their teachers and things of that nature to their parents, maybe some situations where that parent-student relationship is not strong. I want you to talk about this, and I guess you're just concerns about this medical part.
So, one, in Washington state, we have a different framework by which young people are able to secure care and secure mental health care. And so if we wanted to change those parameters, let's ask that bigger question and change that framework. In terms of the school setting piece and access to medical records, I'll pull back the lens and look historically for a minute. When I was in graduate school, in public health school in the 1990s, the emergency that our Surgeon General, David Satcher, talked about was the high rates of teenage pregnancy. And there have been decades of efforts since then to embed services in schools and high schools. And so many of, for example, in Seattle, many of our public high schools have clinics embedded in them. And so students are able to freely go and get services, and they're able to get information and education and ask an adult questions who is an expert in these areas. So there's been a lot of important gains for the well-being and the health of our young people by matching up and embedding health services in our high schools that I think starts to get funny with this parental bill of rights and access to those medical records, because that would be a different standard than we have across the board. Okay. And the piece that I wanted to make it a little bit more personal around is, one, this issue that sometimes in a person's family, it's the family that's not safe, right? A parent is not always the safe person one can go to. Harm can happen in the family, and you need to be able to have a trusted adult to bring that to. And so I think that there's a way in which creating confusion around this enables folks to be uncertain, to teachers and educators and counselors not to know how to show up for the student. But I'll go even more granular. In our personal family's journey, my daughter was sexually assaulted at age 16 between her, right before her junior year.
Thank you for sharing. I'm very sorry to hear that.
And she has been open and has spoken about this. But what was key for her journey of recovery was being able to safely access care at her school setting. Yeah. And she made a decision that even though we were in active conversation about this, she wanted to get STI testing. She wanted to talk to people. She wanted to have that control over her healing journey. And so it made a big difference that that was available in a school setting. If we start to create uncertainty and confusion around the confidentiality of this that isn't coherent across the standard in the state, that's where question marks happen.
I got you. Vicki, it feels like you're trying to get to some sort of middle ground here in terms of what you said earlier, where potentially you're able to protect people who are in these protected classes, like transgender people, but also respect parents. Can you talk more about that? I don't want you to do the legislature's job, but I feel like you might be here. How do you get to that point to answer some of these concerns that Tyler has brought up?
Well, I think, Tyler, one of the primary reasons that states have increasingly been adopting parent bills of rights is because school rights and responsibilities, parents' rights and responsibilities, medical records, they're scattered all throughout state statute, not to mention throughout federal statutes. And if you've ever tried to read that, you could go cross-eyed with it. And it also becomes complicated when you're dealing with, are you going to a family medical provider, or you do it on-site, third party? It can get very confusing. One of the biggest strengths of a parent's bill of rights is you can actually put it on a school district website or a charter school website, and here we go, everybody can be on the same page. That's one of, I think, the strongest arguments in favor of a parent's bill of rights, because it takes all these question marks and it erases them. And something else I would add that I'm particularly excited about for Washington is we're a local control state. So I've heard of it, I come from a local control state, and if I could share this, we went through similar debates in Arizona, and a superintendent of one of the largest school districts in the United States of America shared confidentially with me, and this school district was located in a particularly conservative, traditional area, that having local control was so critically important to developing policy. So I'd say use that, you know what the laws are, and you can craft policy that works for children in your communities.
Thank you for that. But what about this part where parents are bad actors? I mean, can you talk to me about that piece?
Yes.
Because I just don't know how you're able to jibe that with what I'm seeing currently in 2081, the original version.
There are lots of things that we can already do because, for example, if parents are bad actors, they are already prohibited in state law from receiving anything about children, accessing medical records, reports. That's already in statute. If what we could do, I find it interesting that many of the same lawmakers who supported 2181 last year are now saying, oh, we have concerns. That's a technical correction. We can make sure that LGBTQ children and other children who are at risk can be included in those protections. That's a tweak.
Okay. Do you see that middle ground there, Tyler? I just want to make sure about you.
I guess the thing that I'm confused about, and I think that there is a process, for example, that Senator Claire Wilson and Representative Monica Stonier have brought forward to align the Parental Bill of Rights legislation with the state framework. And so that's, if you do the plain reading of what has been in the House bill,
if I may, House Bill 1296, Senate Bill 5181, keep going.
Yes, but in the House bill, it is just taking that framework, articulating the student rights as well, plus saying that our teachers, putting in new language around keeping our teachers safe from retaliation so that they can create safe, affirming, loving classrooms and do what they do best, which is teach. So I guess what I'm not understanding, Vicki, is what issue you have, if we're talking about how are we making this easier for families to understand and parents to partner with their teachers and us to create safe and welcoming schools that are free of discrimination, where kids can be kids and thrive and excel and have the opportunity to feel welcome. I guess I'm not understanding what your concern is with an effort to just bring that in line with our state laws and to reaffirm our students' opportunities and our safety, kind of that safety for teachers to not face retaliation.
Please.
Well, I do have to step back and say it's kind of stunning how we started over here with, we're just affirming the rights that parents have always had. Because let's face it, over the past decade, not just in Washington, but across the country, the National School Boards Association wanted parents put on a terrorist watch list. I mean, parents are being treated increasingly as public enemy number one, whereas previously, schools used to act in loco parentis. That was a position of eminent trust. Now it's been flipped on its head, where it's an entitlement that everybody else has a right to other people's children, but parents are left out in the dark. So this is a rebalancing effort to make sure that parents' efforts are affirmed. And these sorts of, forgive me, Tyler, teachers are going to be assaulted. These doomsday scenarios, I would ask one question. We have had parents' bills of rights for at least 15 years. Statute goes back even longer. I'm a professional researcher. I couldn't find a single solitary instance of actual harm done to a child, done to a student, as a result of parents' bills of rights. These are, again, we have to step back from fear. And what does it really do?
A quick rejoinder, if you could.
No, I'm just, one, I think it would be really interesting to hear the states that you're citing and what examples you're looking to, because I think that the kind of norms, rights, freedoms, values that we hold here in Washington State, for example, I grew up in South Carolina, are very different than in Louisiana. And so it seems obvious to me that if you took a cut and paste from Louisiana and brought it to Washington State, that there
I'm
would
going to push
be.
back.
Okay.
I'm
I'm just curious
because
where your success stories, like which states you're talking about. But I think that's moving also off of where we are in Washington and
Briefly, if you could,
No,
and I'd love to move on.
This isn't a cut and paste. Again, I think what states do, and that's the beauty of federalism, is that you look to the best and you discard the rest.
Okay.
This is not a cut and paste. In fact, this bill is markedly different from Arizona's, Florida's, and nearly two dozen more. Ohio's was just passed.
Okay.
So these are all different because every state is different. However, Washington exceptionalism does not make it okay to base policy on something that's fearful when you've given there have been no tangible examples from parents' bills of rights and children being less safe.
Can I make sure I guide this discussion in another way?
I'm not sure where this is going.
Okay, well, I do want to make sure that I bring it back to, we've been talking a little bit about these health issues, and then there are some criminal case notices here that need to be pulled apart here too. So Initiative 2081 originally said parents should receive immediate notification if their child is questioned by law enforcement or if a crime has been committed against them. The House bill, the Senate bill are talking about amending that, saying parents should be notified at the first opportunity, but in all cases 48 hours, which aligns with a bipartisan state law from 2004 on this. This revision definitely got some pushback, didn't survive in the Senate, appears to be still alive in the House. And I just wanted to talk about this piece with you, Vicki, if I could, because I think what I've heard from a number of state Democrats is they don't want to get in the way of an investigation by law enforcement when it's happening. That's why they want to give at least some space there. Can you respond to that piece of it? Because I think that's what they're trying to do here, and have that, again, align with state law.
Well, see, I think this is where the local control is so important, because you can
local control for the school district?
For the school district, because there is room for prudence. Obviously, if a police officer saying, hey, we need some time because there is an exigent circumstance going on, we know, of course. However, those are exigent circumstances. If you're a parent and your child is involved in anything involving law enforcement, unless you are a parent who, do not, as state law, you don't have access, you can bet. I think this would actually protect folks at school, because I got to tell you, imagine as a parent, you weren't contacted.
Right.
Hit the roof.
Well, and that's what the state law from 2004 says. It says school districts need to talk to parents at the first opportunity,
yes,
or 48 hours. So I just don't. That's the part of it that I think a lot of people are having trouble understanding here. This immediately point, if there is a situation with law enforcement, maybe they do need that extra time.
And there are exceptions to that.
Okay.
But immediately, I've got to tell you, our default should be set to you notify parents immediately. If there's any question, notify the parents. And so I think what is very concerning, particularly given in Seattle with so many reports of horrific crimes against children being alleged, we need to default to immediately. Yes, let's stop making the exception the rule, or preventing sound public policy from happening. But immediately, yes, that's the expectation for most reasonable people. I turn over my child to you, I entrust my child to you. Something happens, you're going to get in touch with me immediately.
And I think that's what the state law says. Do you have any take on this, Tyler?
I do not, but I'm finding
it feels
that there's
congruent with the medical issue a bit.
It feels like we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I think that there are folks who are in public safety, first response, understand the technicalities of this, that could be guiding and informing our state policy and our schools on best practice, and that's not my area of expertise. But I think that there are questions here that I'm still struggling to reconcile of, and maybe you'll guide us back into this conversation, because you're talking about states that model success, and I'd love to, if we had more time and a longer day, to align that with where families like mine and kids like mine, parents of trans kids and trans young people, are being criminalized. And so I do think that without getting into the deep technicality of which state you're talking about as success, it's hard to have a conversation nationally. And so I think bringing it back here to Washington and figuring out how we are making sure that all of our kids are safe to learn in school, and that our teacher can't be sued because my first grader felt safe enough to draw a skirt in their self-portrait, right? So I do think that clarifying that our legislators are doing is important work. Because it is confusing times, and it seems to me that you're saying two things of like, don't go doomsday and fear, and then you're telling me terrible things are happening to kids, and then you're telling me that it's all okay and we should be fine. So I want to partner with schools and ensure the success of our kids, yes.
And thank you for bringing up what you said about time, because we're just about out of it, of course. And we've had a good conversation here, I think, and I know there's a lot more to it. But if I could, Vicki, ask you to wrap up here, because I think a lot of lawmakers are listening to this. They're hearing some of the different things that are being said on social media nationally by the president, by Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas. And so I'm trying to whittle it down to what you would like to say to them. I mean, we even have Brian Haywood, who was the original sponsor of this, saying, I'm going to file an initiative to stop this even before the state passes it, which is a little strange. We'll see where that goes. But I just wanted that last thought, if you could. What do you want to say to legislators here? I can give you a minute, please.
I think that legislators should take a big cue from the fact that this is one of the most popular initiatives that has ever happened in the history of the state in terms of how many signatures there were. Going back to at least 1973, this initiative was number 5.
Close to 450,000 signatures.
Yes, exactly. So there is a demand for it. This isn't, a flash in the pan. So I think that, and what the people of Washington want is the version they passed. And I'm actually quite concerned that are we for democracy, or are we only for democracy when we get the result we and our friends like? That to me is chilling. So I think we follow where it is, use our local control to, make sure all children are safe in those exceptional circumstances. And we already have protection on the books where parents can't go and threaten teachers and all of this.
All right. Thank you for that. Some final thoughts for lawmakers, again, in light of the fact that this was a very popular measure when it went out with petition signers. 450,000 people nearly signed it. Just some last thoughts for legislators. I can give you a minute, Tyler.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to think together with both of you, and also the work that our legislators are doing about how we're ensuring our schools are safe, thriving, welcoming of all students from a diversity of backgrounds with different lived experiences, having the chance to expand their horizons, but also particularly how we are holding, you brought up where the president is and what this moment is. The president has in his crosshairs families like mine and kids like mine, and saying that we shouldn't get to exist, saying that families like mine shouldn't get to make healthcare decisions about our kids, that kids like ours shouldn't be able to go to the bathroom in public or get a passport. And that's deeply troubling. So I do think that there requires a higher level of consideration and scrutiny from our lawmakers in Olympia, who have been elected by us to uphold and consider the framework and how we reconcile these pieces together, so that our teachers can meet our kids where they are and do what they do best, educate, and our kids, particularly our kids who are different, have a chance to feel like they belong.
Thank you both for this input here, and we will be right back. What are people saying on social media about the debate over the Parents' Bill of Rights in Olympia? One person writes, "Why do parents have to fight for their rights regarding their children? This is ridiculous." Another person comments, "What rights are being eroded? What about the kids with abusive, neglectful, or dangerous parents?" We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattle.gov or find us on social media. Good to hear those opinions. And Vicki and Tyler, thank you very much for your input as well. And we will see you next time on City Inside Out.